Good morning, sir. I am Jocelyn Fang from BTW Media. It's truly an honor to have you with us today. You have been called the father of internet in Chile, and your work has shaped not only Chile's digital foundation, but also the regional collaboration that connect Latin America to the world. To begin, could you please introduce yourself and tell us how you first become involved in the very beginning of the internet?
I started working on email back in the 80s, at the end of actually, that was at the beginning of the 80s. I recall when I was a visiting professor in the US, actually at Texas A&M University, that I got a letter from my colleague in Wisconsin saying, Florencio, from now on, I would like that we exchange on our work on over email. And she gave me a strange address, grace@cs.wisc.edu. Okay, so I went to the computer science group in the department and said, how do I do that? And they said, well, gee, you should go to the computing services in the middle of the campus to see what is going on and whether they can give you access to email. So there was no email everywhere, starting email in the universities, and it was centered at the data processing center of the university at that time. So after a while, I started to investigate how you could actually have email on your desk, and that was the start of the story. Then I came back to Chile in '85, and I started to also ask my colleagues, how do I have access to email? What are the initiatives and so forth? And some colleagues pointed out to me that there was a group working on trying to connect the universities among themselves and then to the email networks. There was no internet at that time, so we're talking about '85. As you may recall, NSFNet, that is the first initiative to connect IP networks on the academic side, was launched in 1986. So it was about that time. So there were several networks, email networks connecting, and there were some IP networks, research in particular, connecting, but it was not a common thing. So NSFNet was the first backbone in the US for the what we call now the internet. That was connectivity at the research network level. So that was the start of the story. Then I got involved more and more, and we finally connected to first to the email networks, BITNET, back in '87, and then to the internet formally in 1992, at the beginning of '92, with some previous trials and different things that we had to do in order to have the connectivity link that was not also quite common at that time. You know, the only available telecommunication services in Latin America basically were over satellite. That was the beginning.
Okay, thank you. So when you lead Chile's connection to BITNET, that must have been both a technical and institutional challenge. Could you please tell us what the main difficulty was at the time and how you and your team managed to overcome them?
Well, the first actual difficulty was that the cost. That was the main issue because, of course, we had modems, connected to the internet requires some um, fixed line connectivity with an international line. Our first connection was to the University of Maryland in the US. And to get access to that, we needed to purchase a satellite link. Satellite links, fixed satellite links were very expensive. First of all, the issue was how to get the money to pay for that link. And the nice story is that at that time, there was a NASA center here in Santiago, the Center for Space Studies of the University of Chile. There was tracking satellite tracking station for NASA that was used for launch and other communication facilities for NASA. But what they had, we thought they had lots of communication facilities in the site because they had a lot of antennas. But actually, those were antennas to track satellites and to command satellites, and in particular, they were used also during the NASA missions. but that was not a communication center indeed. They were purchasing actually communications, day-to-day communications from the national telecommunications company. So it was not a communications facility. We thought at the beginning it was that, but it was not. So, but those guys had this um, satellite link. There was a permanent satellite link for their use to the US. And then, so that was to the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is in near Washington, D.C. So actually in the neighborhood of Washington, D.C. So we started to find out how we could use that line that was used for other purposes to connect to the BITNET network. And that was kind of an interesting political challenge because that line was for operational purposes of NASA. And our friends at the Center for Space Study told us, well, guys, we don't use that line during the nights. Maybe you can use it during the night to transfer email. And we said, gee, that would be great. That was the beginning of several months of political work. At that time, there was an ambassador in Chile, Harry Barnes. He liked the idea, but it was not easy to convince NASA that a university got in the middle of an operational line that was a crucial line, in particular for the time when they launch a mission. But they finally agreed to share the line during the evenings. So at 8 p.m. every evening, an operator in NASA in Goddard and in NASA in Chile turned on a switch, and we were connected. So that was fun because actually it required a lot of work from the U.S. ambassador in Chile and from our colleagues at the university, of course, the president of the university and so forth. And at the beginning, it was just a simple request. Hey guys, can we use the line? It was not so simple, but after a couple of months of mail and formal letters exchange, and of course some phone calls from the ambassador and the president of the university, so it finally happened. So we started our email connection in 1987 to the BitNet. So that was the beginning of the network. From there, we started to build the national network. And finally, in 1990, when the democracy came back to Chile, as you may know, the new president of the National Science Foundation, the Chilean National Science Council, actually is called CONICET. Now it became a ministry, but at that time there was a council, and the new president, the newly appointed president of that council, listened to us about this important issue that was going on email exchanges, and we were dreaming of online connectivity full day, and we were also thinking at that time on accessing libraries all over the world, accessing computing facilities. Of course, the web was far away yet. And so we convinced him, and he was very easy to convince, by the way. It was a very short conversation. He said, gee, that's very interesting. Why don't you try to do it? He said that to myself. I will give you the support. So after negotiations, we got the funding from that National Science Council to purchase this first satellite link to the US. And that was a permanent link into UMD, University of Maryland. It was very modest, 56K bits per second. So it was good only for email, basically. I remember when we became aware of the birth of the web. I was, of course, as you may know, the idea was born in Switzerland at CERN by Tim Berners-Lee, and he devised that as a tool to exchange data between scientists. And so this idea of the URL and all those things that we all know very well now, those were starting ideas. And you may also know that one of the first services that was not a scientific service that was posted on the internet, on the web, was the Vatican Library. There was a lot of beautiful images. The problem was that with our 56K, bit, the speed of downloading images was very slow. So that was also the beginning of we need more, and started to work on developing our Chilean network that was fully established in 1992 by mid 1992. And from there on, we started to grow, of course.
So later you become the driving force behind the REUNA and its successor REUNA 2, the network that play a vital role in connecting university and research institution. So how does this creation of UNIRA change the development of internet in Chile and perhaps even across Latin America?
REUNA was one of the first networks in academic networks in Latin America. The other one was having birth almost at the same time. I would say I maybe a bit earlier. The RNP, which is the National Network of Brazil. They were very also early adopters of the internet. I remember a meeting at the end of 1987 when we were first connected with BITNET. I attended a meeting in Princeton where about 80 or 90 people working on academic networking got together. Actually, that meeting was organized by Larry Landwehr, that you may know the name. He was the creator of CSNet, and he was behind this idea of connecting everything. That was the first time I heard of NSFNet. That was connecting the computing centers of the supercomputing centers of the US at the incredible speed of 1.5 megabits per second, which is now even a joke for a phone. But that time it was very important. So at that meeting there were three groups of Latin Americans, a couple of Brazilians, a couple of Mexicans from the Monterrey Technological Institute, and myself from this new network. The idea of REUNA, the name of the academic network, was born in '87 in a meeting of the university computing centers and computer science department centers. So we started to call it the REUNA, I would say, at the end of the '80s. By '89 or '90, by then, we called it the National University Network. REUNA, Red Universitaria Nacional, it means just that, National Universities Network. And so it was very important that we could get together with all the universities, almost all the universities. There were some dissents at the beginning, was everywhere, I think. So most of the universities got together and got support from the National Research and Science Council, as I said to you, to install the first IP network with the Cisco routers and all of that. So that was very important because that first of all, provided a backbone for Chile, for the whole set of universities from the north in Arica, close to Peru, and to the south in Punta Arenas, close to the Cape Horn. So a very long network. So this is about 4,000 kilometers network. And that was basically from the north to 1,000 kilometers south, which is about 3,000 kilometers. That is what we call the most of the land part of Chile. Then we have these lots of islands to the south, and then we have the part of the Patagonia and Cape Horn. So in that terrestrial part, we purchased those things from a national company. They were basically running over microwaves and things like that. No fiber yet at that time. And of course started linked to Punta Arenas in the south, very far away. So that was the first network that was established between '92 and '94. So it was very important because then the universities started to grow their own networks inside. And by the same time, I was in '92. Yeah, I think it was in '92. Our colleagues from Europe were also building their own network, of course, much faster, but they were thinking of having their own regional network. There were, of course, different types of networks in the Europe with different protocols. There were some IP networks, but most were email networks, UCP networks, and other protocols. So a lot of work had to be done before connecting all of them. They were dreaming of that, and they invited us to meeting to talk about this. So we started talking about that. But there was a dream because our network In Latin America, there was no network of universities. So we exchanged email with our Brazilian friends who were trying also to build their own network. And the conversations went over several years because it was not easy to obtain land connectivity. The land connectivity in Latin America started to become a reality at the end of the 90s. Actually, there were just a couple of submarine cables going into South America. There was one that was established at the beginning of the 90s, basically for telephony. There was a cable going from Spain into Brazil and Argentina, going for the Atlantic coast. And there was a cable from the US up to the north of Chile, a Pan American cable. It was also for telephony, basically. So there was no way to purchase data circuits. So the real cables came into work in 2000. The first global crossing cables started to just go around Latin America, around South America and North America, and connecting everything. But that was the birth of the new networks. During all that time, there were different initiatives in Latin America, in Argentina, Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, and so forth. So we were exchanging email, meeting sometimes in order to see how we could eventually build something. And there was an initiative which is very important. I don't know if you have in your list a friend of mine, Saul Han. He was from OAS, Organization of American States, and they were trying to help us. See, how can we help? And so he got funding to install a satellite center in Florida. And I think it was in Hempstead, in Florida, and connected several Latin American networks to that point to connect from there to the NSF net. That was during the 90s. I think it was 96, if I recall very well, REDUCIT, they call it REDUCIT. That was the Hemispheric Science and Technology Network. So he got connectivity for several of our Latin American countries to a single point in Florida, from there to NSF net. Also, you might know the name of Steve Goldstein from NSF. He was also very, very important for all of us because he was supporting all these connectivity initiatives to the NSF net from Latin American countries. So basically, at the end of the 90s, most of the Latin American countries, I would say almost all of them, connected to the NSF net, be that by a single link or a couple of links. So like the Brazilians, they had, I think, had 3 different links into the US. We had a couple of links to the US at that time from Chile, and there were links from Argentina, from Mexico. I think from Mexico, there were also links across the border. I think there was kind of some connectivity in the north of Mexico and Ensenada to the California network, and other connectivity from Monterrey across the border also. So there were several connectivities from Latin America. So at that time, we used to say that our Latin American backbone was the US. So that was until 2003, thanks to an initiative of the European Union, through the European Commission. We got together again, but this time they provided us some funding. And there was also these uh, cables that were just installed in 2001, the global crossing cables. So the global crossing cables that were touching all of the Latin America, in particular, all the countries in the coast. It means every country except, unfortunately, Paraguay and Bolivia, because those are the only countries in Latin America that do not have access to the sea. So there were fiber connectivity across all of Latin America. So at that point, we started to dream of or purchase already some of the links individually at the beginning. So each one purchasing from Global Crossing, or some of us at that time also were using a donation that was provided at the beginning by Global Crossing. A few years of links, 64 meg. That was a crucial change into the US by using the global crossing cables. That was a deal that was provided by FIU, the Florida International University, and our friends from the AMPATH projects. So that was the beginning, the first connections of Latin American countries to the fiber. And then in 2002 came this European project that actually started to operate physically in 2004. In 2004, we finally draw a Latin American topology using the cables, using the basically the global crossing cables at the beginning, but there were other cables already. And the Emergia cable, that was the Telefonica cable, was a different cable. It was also very important. And there were also some new cables being deployed. National Grid from the UK started to build a network in the south and the southern corner of Latin America, and between Argentina, Chile, and their plans were to join also Brazil and so forth with a network of cables. But unfortunately, there was a crisis in 2000, 2001, and so those projects were abandoned. But the fibers stayed in place, and that was also part of the future of our networks, because we then later got access to those cables and started to light those cables ourselves. That was the continuation of the project. So in 2004, as I said, we started this Latin American network that is called RedCLARA. So RedCLARA was born in 2003 as an initiative from the Latin American countries, also in response to this idea from the European Union to, gee, why don't you guys get together and connect to us? And not only to the US, but also to Europe. And I said, yeah, gee, guys, that we're very much interested. Actually, we have been working together as a group for a long time, but money is an issue. So they said, well, we can pool some money. And so let's start working together, and we will maybe build something between us. So that was the beginning of RedCLARA. And so that was also the beginning of the network that connected the Latin American networks. So the first connectivity was between Brazil, Chile, and then Argentina, then Mexico. I don't remember exactly the order of the connectivity, but we built this Latin American network that was interesting because in that way we could collect traffic and send it to the outside world, to the other continents with more powerful links. So that was the beginning of RedCLARA, and I moved from REUNA to RedCLARA at the beginning of 2005 to take in charge that project. I was there for 12 years, or 13 years almost. So I left in 2017, RedCLARA, and they have been growing, and they have a wonderful network. But the story started, of course, with a few hundred megs, and now they have ownership of several 10 gigs, 100 gigs links across the Atlantic, and 100 gigs links in the backbone in Latin America. So they have grown a lot, and also in each country, the networks have grown a lot. So that is more or less the brief summary of the story. There were a lot of anecdotes in the middle, but that is the mainstream.
As you mentioned, Clara, so you were so deeply involved in building regional cooperation. So from your perspective, what was the most important turning point in the early internet history of Latin America, especially when it came to academic networks?
I think that the key point was the project that was funded by the European Commission. That was the key point, because before that, each country was purchasing its own circuit into the US, and there was no connectivity to other continents. So the building of a backbone in Latin America was a key factor to grow. So that was built starting with this project that was funded by the European Commission. The project was approved in 2003. And as I said, we started operating actually in 2004. Well, that was a key issue because that allowed us to build, first of all, a negotiation power to talk to the different telecommunication providers and say, well, gee, guys, we're building something for the community, and we are building something. We're required to exchange traffic not only between us but with other continents. But it's important that the Latin American traffic stays in Latin America for speed, for different issues, and also that allows them to talk to the other continents on an organized way. So I had meetings with the young people in Europe, with the US and in Canada for North America, and also with the Asia Pacific networks. So right now, for instance, RedCLARA has direct connectivity to the US, to Europe, and to Africa. So the African network, we're also connected through a direct link between Angola and Brazil. So, but this is not only for Brazil; it's a connectivity from RedCLARA into the African network. So the key milestone was the creation of RedCLARA backbone in 2004, and that was based on the funding of the European Commission. So that was very important. That was the breakthrough, actually, into getting us together and building this organization that is now in the name of all of us works and purchases new links or so anytime we have the opportunity as a group to grasp a new connectivity, for instance, maybe in the near future, a connectivity from China to Chile that is something that is being planned, one day will be true. And of course, at that time, I'm sure that RedCLARA will be behind the connectivity to the Asia Pacific through a direct link across the Pacific.
When you were laying Rose an early foundation, the internet was still an experimental tool for research. At the time, did you imagine it would grow into such an powerful global utility? And how does today internet compare to what you once envisioned?
Of course not. Of course not. For several reasons. First of all, back in 1992, the guys who were actually using a computer were just basically people in corporations or people in the universities. Some strange guys like myself had a computer at home, but those were very, very rare people. I mean, it was not massive. So one of the first breakthroughs, I would say, it was 1986, 87. You remember maybe 1986? I think in the cover of the Time magazine, there was a computer and Man of the Year. So you know the cover Man of the Year that appears every year on Time. That year, I think it was 86, if I'm not wrong, but it was either 86 or 85. So the cover was Man of the Year, the personal computer. So the personal computer that was born in the 80s, remember the IBM PC, the Apple, and all of that, they became popular. The personal computer became popular in the 80s, at the middle of the 80s. In Chile, I recall that 1989 was the year when the personal computer got into the big stores, like any of the big stores, the consumer stores. In Chile, we have Falabella and others, but the US Sears and so forth. So those guys uh, started to sell personal computers. And that was a key point because at that point, the internet started to receive a lot of people. So that was an important issue. Of course, the creation of the web was key. The creation of the concept of the web was 1989, but that was a starting point. But of course, the development of the URL interface, I remember even talks from during the 90s trying to convince the people in business to use the internet to sell things. So people were not enthusiastic, of course, as you know, at the beginning. So they were thinking this online selling was quite strange for many people. So, but of course, to sell and to have that sales stream at the right size, you need a lot of consumers. And for that, it was crucial to have personal computers because otherwise there was no access at home or no access outside work. So the combination of the beautiful interface, the hypertext, and the use of images and everything to have that possibility of accessing, selecting whatever you want to sell to buy from a screen, that was possible with the web. And then the personal computer. So the combination of both was key. But of course, then there was the next step. That was the popularization, of course, of the cell phones. The cell phones, of course, the creation of the cell phone with a touch screen was important for people to access in an easy way to without understanding any kind of codes or instructions that were complicated for most people. So if you wanted to use the internet in 1993, 94, you need to know instructions and codes, and you need to know the name and the parameters to the way it called to a function. So it was for most people, it was unreachable. But with the graphic interface, things changed. And with the graphics interface on a powerful personal phone, that changed everything, of course. So from there to the social networks, there have been huge changes, but of course, impossible to dream of at that time. I remember having dreamed of personal computers with touch screens back in the 90s because the technology of touchscreen was already available, but it was very expensive. So, of course, as everything, you start with something that is experimental or maybe something that is commercial for a small group, and then there is massification, and from massification comes the change in pricing and improvement of the technology.
Thank you. Every pioneer journal comes with uncertainty. So, was there any moment that you feel things may not work out, whether due to the technical, financial, or political obstacles? And how did you navigate those challenges? Is this still funding?
Well, I myself was involved in several crises, of course, across the time in terms of financial crisis and convincing people to put the right amount of funding or negotiating with providers so that we can eventually get a discount or whatever it is, support and so forth. But I never doubted that it was important to continue. That is important. Of course, difficulties there are everywhere. I mean, whenever you are trying to build something, you have to solve issues, and some issues are harder than others. But if you believe in what you're doing, there are two possibilities: either you succeed or you fail. So I didn't doubt that it was important. At that time, of course, in the 90s, it was important for us as a scientists, as a group of people working and trying to share resources, having access to information, share computer resources, and so forth. And then it became important for the ordinary people to access services. And from there on, of course, everyone was interested.
That was very insightful for me. And looking back now across decades of leadership and innovation, so what achievement are you most proud of? And if you go back, is there anything you could have done differently?
Oh, yeah, well, I'm very proud of having contributed to get my country in a good position in terms of technological development, not only on the internet side, but things that came with, and of course also very keen of the success of RedCLARA. All that implies that they continue to exist, they continue to be successful, and that is something that is very, very nice for somebody that has been involved at the beginning in the birth of those things, and to see that your child is growing and healthy. So that is very important. And of course, I'm sure that going back in time, I have done maybe managed we had some difficulties, financial difficulties in the past with the networks, and the managers succeeded in solving those issues. And maybe there were some hard times. I learned a lot in terms of how to manage different problems. I was a learning experience, of course, and I think that there are things that could have done differently. Maybe improve the skills to convince some other people. Maybe change some of the models we were working at the beginning. But in the end, things came out properly, and I'm happy that they succeeded, they happened that way. And I still like to continue pushing for the development of some technologies. As you may know, now I'm in the Earth observation technology side, working on a different topic, different in terms of I'm not anymore in telecommunications. I use telecommunications a lot, but basically to foster the use of Earth observation satellites, not communication satellites, Earth observation satellites, which is now my new toy. So I'm working on it, very enthusiastic, and that is something I enjoy very much. I enjoy very much telling people what I think is a good technology to support and to use.
And finally, as someone who helped build the Internet Foundation in Latin America, so what lesson from this early day do you think today's generation should remember as they shape the future of Internet?
I think the only lesson I can give is just believe in what you're doing and work hard, learn from the community, and don't despair. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing this incredible insight and memories. Your story reminds us that internet progress has always been built on vision, persistence, and collaboration. It's been a
Correct.
true privilege to hear your perspective today.
Thanks to you for the interview, and have a good success with your work.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Bye
Bye.
bye.